Well, good morning, Vincent.
Good morning.
It's been a couple of weeks, hasn't it? Or something.
Yeah, yeah, it could be at least 10 days, I think.
Yeah. I wanted to start by asking you a couple of questions. Maybe an infra. I mean, we're both infrastructure engineers, so I have an infrastructure question for you.
Okay.
So there's this wonderful GitHub account of this person here. I was
Mm,
just
that's
trying to. So imagine there's like an AWS landscape like this, where the fruits here are basically different teams, right?
yeah,
So some teams have a dev account, some have the whole the whole shebang. And actually, this is not even accurate. Like sometimes they can have deployments in different regions, right? It could be US one,
right.
AP. uh, uh, I should have. Sorry, this is not the best example, but I, I had to be quick about it. Um, so so each team like potentially has a number of deployments, so we say, right? I think that's the correct terminology because they could have a deployment in US East 1, Singapore, same account, different environments, and each environment is mapped to an account. Yeah. So my question is that like I have a landscape like this in a big company to manage, and often enough I'm like, does Team Mango have stuff in this region? And like I don't know. Um, but it's even worse. I mean, if I had this up-to-date JSON, I probably could easily, quickly answer, yeah, okay, they should have stuff in US one. But
Hmm.
the trouble is that sometimes it's up to the different teams to deploy their own infrastructure. So it's like then again, I don't even know if they've actually really done deployments. You know what I mean? It's like so as a platform engineer, I have to like sort of keep an eye on what people are doing, but it's very difficult for me to keep it. So I thought to myself, this example is one I struggle with on a daily basis. Does tacos or your tool, or I guess I mean Terraform Cloud will probably be the greatest tool for this, but like, how do I track?
Yeah. So with the grid, what I do, and I think other tools like Terra Team or Digger or Spacelift, they also have the concept of labels. So teams can attach labels to states, and you can track if um, if they are having states for resources inside a certain region. Now, the problem could be if you are doing multi-regional Terraform, right? If you have one state that creates, um, for example, VPC peering between two regions and then creates the endpoint on one side
Yeah,
and then does
that's a
the
very good
peerings.
example. That's the kind of like special case I was going to talk about next.
Yeah.
But at the moment, we've gone, yeah, the state file is separated per region. Yeah.
Hmm. Which makes sense. And then another thing before you start with this, in my previous organizations, we also had the first question we asked, do we organized by team than by stage. So, for example, in this case, you have Team Apple has stages dev, prod, and UAT, or do we go by stage and then by team? Because do you first have like dev, prod, stage, and then within dev you have team A, team B, team C, and then within
Yeah,
stage you have team
we
A,
we
team B, team
had
C?
we had a I mean the previous incarnation of this cloud deployment on this particular client they had it whereby there was like one dev account and all the teams were
Hmm.
on it, but the people were stepping on each other's toes all the time.
It's
Would
not
you be able
necessarily
to?
like with, well, the problem we were facing is from a DevSecOps perspective, the rules that apply to non-production stages are different from production. It's easier if you're in AWS Org Manager to basically define your, what's it called, like the units or the organizational units or use on the stages level so that we could apply security policies on the stages level
Oh, you
and
mean
and
like
so
stages as in these environments that I've got
OUs,
here?
yeah. We have nested OUs in AWS Org, right? So we decided that it would make more sense because we are
Oh
attaching
yeah, that's
our
true. I never
organization
thought about
policies.
that. I never thought
Yeah.
about that. That's a bloody good idea, actually. What? I've never done that before. Now, so yeah, so you have a tree. How do I share that with you?
Where we had a discussion between the platform team lead and the DevSecOps team, and then how do we set up our OUs and how do we manage our security policies in our AWS. And we
Oh,
had an existing setup where we had like team A, team B, team C, and then we had dev, staging, and prod under the teams, and we switched it over to the other way because we wanted to manage our policies that way.
yeah, that makes sense. Did the AWS support you? No, not really.
With AWS OUs, they can be like nested, right? And you can attach policies to the OU. So you can attach the non-prod policies to the non-prod OUs, and then all of the teams operate within those. And then when you go to prod, there's more guardrails
I
and stricter
see.
security.
So yeah, I see what you're saying. So the policies apply on top level, top level. I'm not sure that's the right term. Stage,
Yeah.
and then that trickles down. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Why haven't I done that? I feel dumb for not having even done that. And
I mean,
then
because you came from an environment where they were sharing an account and it was causing issues, but AWS is actually at some point I read this book from like microservices from Sam Newman, I think, and he was like saying in the book how AWS even goes so far as to give every environment an account so that like team A prod has one AWS account and team B prod has a separate AWS account. Actually, even worse, like team A has two services, foo and bar, and then team A foo stage goes into one account, and team A bar stage goes into another account, which is like, so you need to do all of the peering, and like, you can only connect or communicate across account boundaries, which is crazy from a small startup's perspective to have all of this AWS account management overhead, right? Um, Another thing is what we wanted was the ability to um, vend an AWS account for a team for a limited amount of time. And
hmm.
then once they were done with it, like return it to a pool. So we wanted on-demand account
What do you mean
creation.
return it to a pool? Don't you just destroy it?
Well, that's the thing. Originally, AWS didn't have a lot of API for
To,
account management. So
oh,
destroying an account was
to
very
delete.
difficult.
Yeah, yeah. I see
Yeah.
what you're saying.
So the
Yeah,
idea is to
I
run
made a video
Cloud
about
Nuke.
that.
Yeah. So the idea is to run like nukes and basically have a pool of accounts and cycle through them, which is a lot easier. And there's
Yeah.
a lot of
So
tools to do that.
do you
I
have?
never
So
used
you've
them.
used AWS Nuke. I think it changed.
There's two of them. I think I use the other, like, there's one from Terra Grunt, which is very popular, or not Terra Grunt, but the Gruntworks nuke that has been forked. I don't think I liked.
You didn't
Yeah, I
like this
think the
one.
fork was better, and there's the Gruntwork one wasn't good. There's a cloud nuke that supports multi-cloud. I remember going through all of them, and only one of them was really well maintained and well
I think
structured.
this is the one that is used in my employer, if I remember correctly.
I have one in my repo as well. Like it's set up in lift and shift because I have tags, which is like nuke don't destroy. You can put a tag, so it's 100% not going to destroy some resources.
I
So
don't even
I
remember
have
this one.
I have cloud nuke and I have AWS nuke. Which one am I using?
Yeah,
Initial POC was done with Cloud Nuke, which was best practice from TerraTest for cleaning up, but it was really bad. And so then I used Rebuy AWS Nuke, which worked a lot better. And
this
then
one you mean?
Ericsson AWS Nuke. Yes. So
Yeah,
Ericsson AWS Nuke is a fork from the original dbuy.
yeah,
They're not
exactly,
maintaining
exactly.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm a big fan of nuking accounts or thermal environments. I made a video about that again. Big
Hmm.
fan. Yeah. So okay. So what I'm okay. Okay. You told me about this stage level
Yeah.
OU organization. That's cool. I didn't think about that for some reason, or wasn't exposed to that. But still, the question remains: how do you I mean, if I mean this is going to be duplicated on each stage, and then of course, I mean, let's just be a little bit explicit. Then again, this is going to be AP Southeast one or something crazy, U East one. They're going to have different resources in different regions. US. EU West 2 or something. And then just to make things even extra spicy, I'm not too sure if it's worth, is it worth putting it here? Yeah, it is because things are split by region. Like for example, they use a database vendor. I'm not going to tell the name of the vendor, but the vendor itself has this notion of different sites. So you can have like a London site and I don't know, an Ireland site and
You're
things like
putting this
this.
under AP Southeast.
Yeah, okay, let's just put it over there. So so yeah, it doesn't make sense there. I should be
Should
over there.
be
I can't get over there very easy. Well, let me just US one or something. So what I'm trying to say here is that like I think hopefully you see the pain. It's like at the moment, like do we separate the state by, this path, or do we clump the state together, even though the database is actually designed
for a single site.
intentionally to be separate, actually, because it's
Yeah.
like a backup.
Mm.
And like I'm just like my head is turning. Like just tracking this is making my head spin. Never mind, uh, you know, uh, the other aspects of operating this platform.
Yeah, I mean, I think the easy way forward always, and this is why I think infrastructure as code and really being able to treat infrastructure as code, um, it involves things like refactoring, right? So I think we
Yeah.
should just go forward with merged, like dry Yagni, you ain't gonna need it type of approach,
Yeah,
merging
just
everything.
yeah,
And
I'm
then
with you
and then
there.
at the point that it's like, oh, actually we're facing issues because of contention on the locks, state locks or whatever, or because
Mm.
of the Terraform plan takes too long or whatever. At that point, there then refactoring needs to be done.
Yeah,
So of
I'm a big
course we
fan
need
of
to have
refact,
like
but
a
it is
roadmap and a
such a
target.
pan. It is such a pan. It's such a pain to refactor because we have like kind of like teams
Yeah,
bothering us all the time saying, no, you can't change this, or like, this is going to be disruptive. It's,
yeah,
I mean, it's not that disruptive, but like just getting, some of these state files are so like high security that it's like a pain just to move it from one place to another.
okay, I can understand that. But one thing, right, from experience running with Terraform a lot is that you must be able to rename things. So that's why I want to decouple my logical identities from their actual physical identities. But then at the same time, my original plan with like the library that I wrote is that you don't get to determine your identities, right? If you use Google Cloud or other providers, usually
Yeah,
you create a resource, you don't determine the ID. Behind the
yeah.
scene is determined for you. So if you change a name or a description, it's not only recreated. And that's good for a lot of scenarios, but it doesn't work like for S3 bucket or an RDS
Well,
maybe. But even then, for an RDS, you shouldn't force the identity on it because then when you need to move things, then it becomes disruptive. But
yeah.
ideally, moving a resource between two different states where it's being managed shouldn't be disruptive. It should
That,
just be like I'm moving the
that's an
resource.
interesting thing that you said there, because like we have a config YAML which we essentially give to each team, because each team essentially manages, I think, what we call a data product. Um, they could have multiple data products, but let's just say it's one to one, even though it's not. And in that config.yaml, we there's a whole bunch of configuration, as we all know. And like for example, feel free to disagree with this but like at this point in time, we actually allow them to set what the IDs are, and these IDs are, cascade in all sorts of weird and wonderful ways
Yeah.
to name different resources. And like how like AWS likes dashes, and then another thing
Oh
likes
yeah.
underscores, and
Then
other things
DNS
can't be,
doesn't allow you to use those
yeah, and then
characters.
other things can't be longer than 20 characters or something crazy like that, or whatever. But like at
Oh
this
yeah.
point in time, we actually allow Team Mango. Like, I mean, if Mango wanted to be a pair the next day, we allow that. But it causes absolute mayhem, honestly.
Absolutely, yeah.
Um,
So this
so
is what I mean, I come from an like accounting background, right? And accounting entries, when you want to slice and dice and analyze your data, you use dimensions. So you attach in AWS parlance, this is tags, right? Labels, and all of this is mutable. So you can create reports that aggregate by certain keys, and then that's why a tagging policy is super important. And that's why also the same with the like the the example here of like how do you organize your states? Do you organize them by dev and then by team or
Mm.
vice versa?
But like,
Those should
but
all be labeling
yeah,
concerns.
we do tag quite aggressively, but like, but does tagging really even help here? Like, if Team Mango decided to become Team Pear or something.
It shouldn't be any problem then, right? If the team tag is really a tag and not tied into any resource identity, changing the identity, sorry, changing the tag doesn't affect the identity. So everything that depends on it is still pointing to the original identity.
Oh, I think I see what you're saying. So instead of like focusing on changing, I don't know, the secret
Logical
name
resource
or
ident.
the stack
So yeah,
name, you change the tag name.
yes, and then you can like always redefine or because everyone worked at organizations and business development teams or the AW like the sorry the C level decides to reorganize and rename the teams, merge the teams, and it causes a mayhem on the infrastructure level because of
That's bloody good advice, Vincent.
physical identity should never be attached to should never be dictated by the organization or the product name. And I think some clouds don't allow you that, right? The problem is a Terraform provider and AWS APIs allows you to do that, and they even have like
Mm,
this prefix like ID
yeah.
underscore prefix thing.
Yeah,
That's all.
you're so right, Vincent. Jesus, I wish was working with you. I'm learning a lot just for this chatting with you every hour,
The problem
an
that you're
hour
gonna
every
get
few
then.
weeks.
I tried to introduce this at a company, and I got a massive um, pushback from engineers because they are used to do clickops in the AWS console, and they're like, I can't find my resources. It was CloudFormation stacks, and the way the CloudFormation like calculates the physical ID name was very confusing because of the nested stack way of doing it. That causes its own set of problems because then you lose resources just because you rename a stack. Now the resources logic identity no longer map, and it just loses track of it. So they are adding more features to like manage refactoring of resources, which Terraform already does for you. But then the pushback was from the engineers that are used to going to the AWS console, and I can't find my specific Redis instance or my specific load balancer
Yeah,
because the name is so.
actually,
And I'm like, the problem is the dashboard. If you
yeah,
don't have a
yeah.
proper dashboard that shows you the tags and shows you to like slice and dice your
Cloud,
resources
Cloud,
by the tags,
to Datadog's credit, Datadog actually does a good job of servicing all the tags.
and that's
But
what it should be,
but
right? Your
AWS
dashboards.
console doesn't. Like, I swear to God, I can't remember what it was, but I was dealing with something the other day in AWS and it didn't have bloody tags or it didn't show the
Yeah,
tags.
tags are not everywhere in AWS, and also not everywhere because there's a conventional of resources. If you put a tag with the key name, it shows up in the UI as the actual resource name nicely. Like for example, on EC2 instance, you cannot control the instance ID, but you put on a tag with a name, and then
Oh
the
yeah, it just
the web
updates.
shows it
Yeah,
nicely.
yeah.
But some of them don't, like the RDS, because the RDS and the
Why
endpoint
why
URL
does
for the RDS
AWS
as well.
do such a
Different
bad
teams,
job
needs
there?
are teams, because every
Different.
team works independently, right?
Yeah, there should be like a Bezos whatever mandate. Make sure that everything's bloody tag or taggable.
Yeah. And so
Um,
I think they're doing a lot of work there with like the resource manager, the tech. You have now the ability to like review all of your resources across your AWS org using the resource manager and then using tags. So there are separate services focused just on that, on like managing your
mm.
resources and finding your resources
Cool, cool.
in
Okay, so
AWS org.
I really like your tips here, but still the question remains, given a platform like this with lots of teams and things like this, is the grid the right tool to make to keep an eye on all this stuff, or what would you suggest? Because I need to know what's going on here sometimes.
Yeah.
Otherwise, when people ask me, "Has Team Mango got the thing in London?" I'll be like,
I think you should reach out to system. I can't speak. I think you should reach out to System Initiative because he's often posting about like they have a programmable graph that allows people to
Yes, we
manage
wanted
their
to talk about system
AWS.
initiative.
Yeah,
So Adam and his colleagues demoed it to us.
CloudWorks.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
that was the
to be honest, I I was a complete asshole, but you got to give me credit because I
as
was.
usual.
So System Initiative, they demoed this like like this big square. I don't know why that's like that. And then
Yeah,
you have your VPCs and things like this. Like first off, I was like, oh man, I hate it when you
those
start
templates.
infrastructure from a networking perspective, but I get it, but I hate it.
Mhm.
Like if you want, yeah, VPC this, VPC that, because I just hate it. I hate like a focus on network based infrastructure. I prefer to think of things as I don't know like this level, and then it goes on like whatever to eventually EC2 and things like this. But then the thing that really got me was like, okay, so you're creating resources, la 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 la. And then I was like, how do you like maintain the state and all that stuff? And he says, oh, this is what it is right now. It was like a
There's a
one-to-one
twin.
mapping. And then I go
Yeah,
like, oh, so how do you do that? How do you like connect to the Terraform provider? He says, oh, we just run AWS CLI commands under the
yeah,
hood.
yeah.
And I was
It's
like,
crazy.
no, no, this cannot work.
I I initially wanted to contribute like my New Year's resolution of this year at the beginning of the year was to like find an open source project and contribute to it. And I was like, okay, SI is it. I'm gonna look into it. And the moment they showed me, like linked me to the TypeScript under the hood, which is literally just calling the AWS CLI, I was like, there's so much auto-generated APIs, like the Terraform provider auto-generated. Um, why would you like go down to just scripting around the CLI? Like literally
Yeah,
TypeScript OS exec. The thing is, that's I think is an implementation detail because the idea of every um, component there being it's a programmable graph, right? The point is that they are simple imperative
mm,
type of scripts. I think it works better for people that are used to Ansible and that are like to write a script in YAML. Basically, every arrow, every component has like their own create, read, update hooks, and those invoke the scripts. And they build a whole bunch of components with all of their CRUD hooks. For example, a VPC that has the create hook, the read hook, the update hook that directly maps to the AWS CLI commands. And that's basically as I build the graph with the hooks that are invocable, like functions. And then they build the whole bunch of like components that are using that graph. So then when they create the VPC, it goes and runs that AWS CLI command, that AWS CLI command
yeah.
when you want to update it. And I mean, I think it comes back to the question like, why doesn't Terraform do that also, right? Because Terraform is just talking to the AWS API. It could just go and find all of the resources that supposedly exists based on tags, because that's what Hashimoto originally did for Terraform. They were just creating resources
Yeah,
and using
yeah.
tags on the resources to
It's
find them.
funny you mentioned that. I was randomly watching a video and he talks about Terraform as a graph API and like, well, okay, but where's your representation of the graph?
So there's this interesting Terraform issue where they ask Hashimoto like, why didn't you just tag like why do you need state? Like, get rid of the state file. And he highlighted all of the issues that you get if you don't have a state file. If you don't, I think one of them was speed. There was others because the physical identity changes if the tag changes. So they tried it and they said, and it didn't really work. So
So basically,
maybe
you're saying that
at the time.
Hashimoto did try something what System Initiative did, but it was just not gonna work.
A long time ago, right? And I think things changed a lot, so I don't know. I think there's some interesting ideas, uh, but I had the same reaction when I looked at the system initiative when I really
Yeah.
lifted up
I
the hook
feel like a
under
bit
the
of a dick
veil.
for dismissing the whole idea because I just thought like it wasn't gonna work just instinctively, but now, yeah, now I mean I started this conversation saying that I need to see a visualization, and then we just go back to system initiative.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they could convince us. In the end, I think this is one of the main, what I learned from building my library is that the framework in itself maybe is approaching the problem from a certain way, but the actual utility comes from the library of components that comes with it. Because like you can interact with the cloud however you want. Like you want to use a state file, or you want to use a Kubernetes operator, or you want to build Pulumi, TypeScript to every possible language. Sure, go ahead, do all of that. The problem is if you cannot give me a nice library of components, if you like when I looked at Crossplane, there was no proper publicly available set of Crossplane resources that I could use with AWS. I would need to build everything out of the box. And the only framework that really has this is AWS CDK, right? Because it comes out of the box, not just with the low-level AWS API interface, but also with the integration patterns of how you use these services together. And then the other framework that does that is SSI, which is, SST, not SSI, what the hell? SST, which is basically using Pulumi, those basic components, and then building high-level system integration
So
patterns on top of it,
just to
or service
rephrase,
integration
just to
patterns.
repeat what my understanding, what you just said, you just like you got to use the tool that has the best coverage of the resources that you're trying to use.
Yeah, and the services, the integrations have integration patterns between services. Because if you use AWS, you must know every single service integrated with IAM,
Yes,
right?
that's
Or
quite a practical look at it.
yeah,
But
and
but
and this is what System Initiative I think spent 5 years doing. They had to spend after they have the basic framework, they have to spend all this time to building all of the components for AWS, writing every single AWS
mm,
CLI script for every single hook that a component needs to
and
invoke whenever
they couldn't have
an
gone down
action
that
happens.
path of what did you show me that was auto-generated? Oh my, I forgot the name of it.
There is a AWS CC like cloud control provider that's auto generated from the AWS APIs. But
Yeah.
again, on its own, that doesn't really help because creating a single API resource does not give you the functionality that you need out of the AWS API because the AWS API effectively is a combination of many resources working together in a
Yeah,
certain configured
but
way.
I'm but System Initiative since they rely on AWS CLI, the AWS CLI surely is their interface, and that's that.
Sure, but the AWS CLI is also just auto-generated wrapper around most of the AWS APIs, right? It doesn't give you like the idea of AWS CDK. The example that I like to give is I have an EC2 instance and I wanted to give it permission to an IAM to an S3 bucket. I have an EC2 instance and I want to give it access to an S3 bucket, right?
So
So
this is like a
now
level two
look
type
at
thing or
how
whatever.
many resources you need to create, right? Maybe you say, oh, but that's a very common pattern in my organization. So I create a Terraform module that combines the two. And then later down the line, you have a situation where the S3 bucket actually needs to trigger a Lambda whenever the S3 instance does something or whatever, or needs to be hooked up to an SNS. And you keep extending that original, very simple, basic pattern until it becomes a massive like module with 40 different parameters to configure whatever use cases you now have after 2 years of using AWS and evolving your product. um, I think the right way is what they are doing with AWS CDK is the actual service teams and the community building proper patterns around these things, such as with abstractions, such as I have an I
Yeah.
principal, I have an resource, and I can grant a principal access to a resource. And if the I principal is an AWS instance and it needs to implement this interface, that means it must have an IAM role that I can refer to.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I
hooking
do
those
like
up
this
under the hood.
idea of encapsulated. I guess my favorite one in AWS is the serverless SAM stuff.
Yeah.
Here's an example that got my head spinning the other day. So a colleague was telling me that when you use ECS, it creates like a bucket behind the scenes. And the trouble is in the organization that what I'm working with, they're so strict about all their bucket policies and things like that. Like for
Yeah.
example, I think you have to have a bucket policy with some deny on it or something like that. Like just off the bat when you create a
Yeah.
with,
CSPs
but
and
the trouble is that ECS creates a bucket, and it doesn't. It relies on that bucket not having the policy for it to work. So basically, this colleague of mine was telling me that they were using ECS and it wasn't working, and they couldn't figure out what the hell the problem was. Because like if you look around ECS documentation, you won't see that ECS requires this bucket to work. It's kind of hidden
Right.
away.
Yeah.
And
And
then
and
so basically that's just show. I mean that's me trying to come up with a dumb counterexample to these abstractions because then you just don't know what the hell's going on sometimes. Especially if they're
so
using
here
common
the
resources.
extraction is the user interface that AWS creates, and when you create the button under the hood, it calls many different APIs to create the bucket and whatever.
Yeah.
And when you then need to capture that into infrastructure as code, now
Yeah.
suddenly you have to
But
go and figure
but
out
if the
what
bucket
happened.
policy get cascades down into that bucket, you're screwed. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah.
I mean,
What you're
it's
saying
a
is
stupid
that
example. It shouldn't really happen, but it happened.
no, but like these things happen all the time. Like I am, I'm very annoyed when people click ops things into a non-production into a production environment because there's a time limit, there's a time constraint, and they didn't have time to do the ISC. They clicked it in on dev, then they clicked it in staging, and now there's a deadline and they need to do it um, because the ISC doesn't work. For
Yeah.
example,
Pipeline doesn't
when
work.
you click something in, it will maybe enable a service linked role into the AWS account automatically. So like
Yeah.
you start using an AWS
Yeah, yeah.
service. If you
That's the
use the
trouble with the
user
console. It
interface,
does a lot of things and you don't even know what it is. It's so hard to capture in
and that's what
infrastructure
I
code.
like about AWS CDK because it actually captures all of those actions. It's like a user interface, but a programmatic one. So it's built to like it's almost the same. I mean, honestly, when you use AWS CDK and you have a bucket and you have a Lambda and you need to connect it to, under the hood, it's going to make sure that there's a resource policy, that there's an IAM Lambda permission, whatever. If
But
the bucket
are
needs to
you
call,
confident that like the AWS console and the CDK are synologous or one to one? Because I'm always a bit doubtful that they are. I'm
well,
very doubtful.
I am very confident that
You're confident. Okay.
90% of the time they are because I believe AWS uses CDK internally as
Yeah.
well to build their products. I
Well,
believe that the teams that build the API interfaces of those services actually contribute to AWS CDK to capture these
okay,
things.
okay.
And
So did you say 80%? Because like, yeah, that's a lot better than say Terraform, where I'm probably like 10%. You know
oh,
what I mean?
absolutely, Terraform is a nightmare.
Yeah.
And having an auto-generated Terraform provider is not going to solve the problem again
Mm.
because the low-level API resources are not the solution. It's a combination of them. And then the comment I get a lot on Reddit is like, yeah, but if you're using a programming language to do infrastructure, you're doing it wrong. And the reality is, again, the the cloud is not as basic as it used to be. It's not just about creating network subnets and EC2 instances and allocating network interfaces. And that used to be probably quite simple, but now you have like IPv6, then you have like your flow logs, then you have a flow log bucket, and then you have all kinds of integration patterns across different services. And I mean, case in point,
Well,
I
sorry,
just
can you just rephrase that? Like, who said like if you're using infrastructure, you're doing it wrong? What?
no, if you're using programming languages
Oh, all right,
um,
right.
like full what's it called, Turing complete programming languages
You're doing it
to
wrong.
write infrastructure as code, you're doing it wrong. That's a very common argument against using general purpose programming language. The most common argument is we just need a config file, we just need to do it declarative, and we need to keep it simple, and it will be
Yeah,
fine.
yeah, 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 yeah.
And
I guess
it's
I'm
a
in that.
fallacy.
To be honest, I'm usually in that camp, but it bites all the time.
Well, you can be in that camp until you do something actual real work, and then you realize that that's a very naive approach. And then every time I come with that argument, people say, "Oh, I worked at like 100 different country large organization, and we have no problem." I don't believe it. I don't believe you have a problem, or I don't believe you work at such an organization. If you think that it's so simple to just
Yeah,
use Terraform configuration.
yeah. I'm just trying to capture what we're saying in a nice graphic, in a nice slide. Uh,
So there's these efforts from the community to use basic Terraform modules to capture all of these usage patterns, and very quickly those modules become just. I mean,
yeah,
what I
you
was gonna
mentioned the
say,
serverless one. Yeah,
yeah, what I was gonna say is, case in point, the argument that the argument that the cloud is simple and we just need to use basic declarative configuration. Just go look at the VPC module.
yeah.
Just go look at the VPC module. Look at how many variables there are, input variables, because you can do IMAP. Sorry, what's it called? When you have IP manager, IP man? No, the basically managed IP, EPAM. yeah, IP
Yeah,
EPAM.
that sounds
So you
right.
can do you can set up a CIDR to control the CIDR
Your
subnet
ranges across the
allocations.
org, yeah.
You can do your flow logs. You can so the amount
Mm.
of things that you can do is so big that if you look at that module alone, you will notice that there's like, I don't know, so many different Terraform configuration files. Each one has a locals block that has multiple indirection layers on top of the put in Julio variable that needs to be set to true before the whole module can be used. But then you have so much in there that you can't tell me that you just need a very basic and then the response is usually, oh, no problem, I just take that beautiful module that has all of these things because people contribute EPAM, I need IPv6 support, I need NAT instance support because I don't want to pay through my nose for NAT instances. Sorry, I don't want to pay for NAT gateways. I just want to spin up an instance and save 20%, and save 80% of the cost of NAT. So I need all of these features, so I just take that module, I remove what I don't want, and I keep it simple. But then you have to maintain your own version of that module. And as
Mm.
things are being introduced, you need to like merge upstream down into your stuff. And basically, everyone is just forking shared resources and then keeping their own private copy of it. And then how many people actually contribute back to it? I think
Yeah,
that's just a that path.
in my current client, we have so many different constructs, and
Are they using AWS CDK, right? And they
yeah,
are trying to
well,
look
we're a
at
mix now.
AWS
We're using
Terraform.
a mix between CDK and Terraform, but historically they were using CDK.
Yeah.
Yeah, it works, but yeah, but we have that problem as you described. So there's nothing that to help me visualize this, Vincent. Fuck.
Well,
Does you,
you
you
have access to the
grid?
grid.
But
So what the grid
uh,
does is right now, I mean, the grid original
but can okay?
design is very simple.
Can the grid? I remember the grid taking in Terraform state, but can it also take in CDK state? Because this is a mix between CDK and Terraform right now. This is another thing that makes my life extra exciting.
Right now the grid
New
just to,
requirements, new
so the
requirements.
grid is you can look at the grid as like two way. You have one is the control plane and two is the data plane. The control plane is the way of creating states and metadata around the states, such as the labels, such as the team or the stage or the region.
Why do you say labels is just labels and
Tags
tags
is
the
a
same thing?
very AWS specific terminology.
Okay, carry on.
Labels is closer to Kubernetes way of doing things. Like in Kubernetes, you have labels and annotations. I just have the key value
What's an
pair.
annotation again then?
Annotations you can apply to resources. Then I think there's two different programmatic paths. One of them is meant to be like the label queries are meant to be much faster to query across the state, and the annotation is less queryable. I think that's why they separate the two. An
Wow,
annotation is some
Jesus.
information that you can, like the annotations you were using for like on an ingress manifest, you may have an annotation that the controller is Nginx ingress, for example, and another ingress manifest might be controlled by another ingress controller. So that goes into annotations. But the labels is like you want to do label queries against the resources to find them. I know that when they were asked about like in Kubernetes, why do you separate labels and annotations? And the response was one is much more performs much better to query. Yeah,
Cool,
because
man.
everything in Kubernetes uses label queries to select resources, right?
Right. So you don't have okay. So there's no CDK. Okay, there's nothing that will help me
No,
here.
right now the grid is purely for Terraform
Terraform.
state. The problem with CDK is it's CloudFormation, right? CloudFormation manages the stacks.
Couldn't you add a source for cloud formation?
I think I think if you look at Spacelift or
Like for
Mass Driver,
example,
they support both.
I think the way that you describe your your employer's what do you call it, infrastructure, is that you had you had CDK, and then you and then you get it, and then you convert it to Terraform. Oh shit, you don't use CDK at all, do you? Fuck. I now remember your setup. You translate
Well,
everything.
I worked at
So
different
everything.
companies.
Okay, so everything's Terraform basically. In
I'll
your
tell you that
current.
my issue was before we have CloudFormation on one team and Terraform on another team, And as a platform team, for example, we like to create our landing zone using Terraform. So we have our networks, our clusters that maybe we have a shared Kubernetes cluster that both teams need to land into. That's your landing zone. So what we need to be able to do is expose those integration points, right? So team B needs to be able to read where's my cluster ID and how do I hook up my product repository so that the Argo CD deployments go into the right cluster and
Okay, so
things
you
like
do
that.
that. So sorry, I didn't quite catch the beginning. So you do that in Terraform, the landing
So
zone.
what I'm just giving you a context of like different teams using different technologies.
All
And
right.
the problem I had was I tried to create an integration registry, and we talked about this because he says at your organization they use a massive JSON file that keeps track of the integration points between different components. So everything registers, just writes information out to a JSON file. And I did
Yeah,
similar things, like I had AWS CDK write to SSM parameter store, and I had Terraform read from SSM parameter store, and I had Terraform write to SSM parameter store, and AWS CDK reading from
yeah,
parameter
yeah.
store.
I prefer the central as I mean this in reality has lots of other fields. Yeah.
Yeah, so the problem with using a JSON file, you're restricted to a usually a Git repository, right? Either you go to a massive monorepo or you do a submodule across all of the repositories so that they have that JSON file, or
Hmm.
I don't know how you're going to get the file in there and version control it and
Oh,
who's the owner.
actually, I kind of I shouldn't say this online, but I kind of rewrote something that we used at work. I
Hmm.
mean, I didn't steal the code. I absolutely wrote it from scratch using I guess a bit of Claude magic. So essentially, what happens is that we have a reusable action
Hmm.
which just feeds in the account group or the team name
Hmm.
and the environment, and then out pops uh, uh, things like, oh, sorry, this is me using the action. Yeah, sorry, the other repo actually had the implementation. There's an action that basically just looks up the stuff in the actions JSON. It's nice and fast. It doesn't do like a full checkout or something weird, and uh, and then just sets the extra information that the Terraform or whatever your infrastructure needs, like the account, the region, a key for this, a key for that.
Yeah. The problem there is like you're using a registry, then you don't know like how stale is that value and who is consuming the value. That was my problem.
Well, I mean, if
Because
it's centralized, the source of truth is pretty sweet. I mean,
sure, but if it changes, how do you trickle down that change or identify who needs to be updated?
yeah, this is why I'm going back to this all the time because I need to know
Right?
what how fresh they
Depends on
are
what.
here. It's
Yeah.
yeah, never mind what's where. I need to know what version they're running.
Or what
And after,
version they have viewed or consumed.
yeah, like we in our repos we tag this, for example, and then we kind of allow them to tag their deployments or what do you call it? Use a branch or whatever to pin. Sorry, pin was the word I was looking for. But then,
Hmm.
yeah, they've pinned, version one here, and like now we're on version five. Like, how do I?
Exactly. So this is also something I learned about this version pinning scenario, is that if you start to deal with this type of deeply nested structures where you
Oh,
have maybe
sorry. I
40
just need
different states.
just hold that thought. I got to reply to my wife. Sorry, the kids need to go to school. I think my wife will take them. So yeah, yeah. Hold the thought. Resume
Yeah, so what we were saying is that version pinning is
version pinning.
important, right? And when you start, I started my career around DevOps with Kubernetes, so I learned very early that immutable infrastructure, your Docker image needs to be hard pinned so that you can do rolling updates because Kubernetes doesn't allow you to use a mutable label. So version pinning is very important. You want to pin your
Ah, so
Docker
so
image.
Kubernetes doesn't allow like at latest or whatever the Docker
No,
convention is.
or officially, the way that Kubernetes is designed is to use immutable tags. And then The way that it
Mm.
detects that a deployment needs to be rolled is when you change something, right? You change the tag. And so it spins up a separate replica controller,
Mm.
starts
I didn't
to
realize it enforced it. Yeah, I know best practice is to use a
Yeah, and there's a lot of workarounds like keep or kill, sorry, to basically track, a Docker Hub image repository and identify if a new metadata, if a new checksum has been pushed for a certain latest tag, and then automatically trigger a rolling update. But then you have to work around it by changing the labels, and then it will start rolling out pods
Okay,
with
okay.
new labels.
So
Those are all
what
workarounds. The
yeah.
original design of Kubernetes is very simple. Your image tag is what determines the version that runs. So you
Right.
cannot use a mutable tag. You have to specify which version you want to run. And if you want
So
to update it,
so
you
you have
change
all
the
these
version and it
Kubernetes
rolls.
manifests. What helps you update them? Sorry, like how do you what's the workflow for people? Like do they get like a depender bot like, oh, you need to bump
Yeah,
your
so we're going back to the point that the design when you start with Kubernetes and Docker and immutable infrastructure is that version pinning is very important, right?
okay.
And as you just highlighted, also when you get a lot of different states and a new version has been published, but you have all of these very niche little states that haven't been touched for a long time, and they're still on version
Exactly.
one,
Yeah,
right?
how do you
And
update
now
them?
you have, and then for example, you have a big organization-wide initiative that you need to upgrade the provider, and then you find out that some really deep nested areas are still using a very old version, and now they suddenly have to go
Exactly.
all the way to production, and
Exactly.
they're
So
like
how do
many
you keep them
major
at the top
versions
of the
behind.
answer, Vincent? I need to know the answer. How
So
do you
so
keep the page
funny,
up to
funny,
date?
funny enough, one of my previous colleagues, he just got rid of all of the versioning. He trunk based, just
This is what I like to do in a sense. Just tell everyone
yeah,
you got to use latest. See ya.
yeah,
Or like, you
latest,
know,
but we're
or at stable or something, or there's probably some other tag.
right. And but if you're in a
Yeah,
monorepo
here,
and
stable.
you're running off Git, you just point to head, right? So when you run your IC, for example, and it checks out the repository and it gets head, and so it gets all the latest version of your modules together with head of your because like imagine that you have a infrastructure monorepo and you have a GitHub action or Atlantis running to do
Yeah,
your IC Terraform plan and apply. So
yes,
the first thing it does on your branch or of master, it will check out the repo and it will take head, right? And then instead of version pinning every single module, which is the recommended right way to do, instead of version pinning every module, you point everything relatively within the repo to your current like
got it,
head,
got it.
right? Which
Yeah,
is trunk-based development, right?
right.
And at that point, that means every single change you make to a module automatically gets propagated across your whole infrastructure.
Yeah, that
And
means,
that
but that means you have to deploy in a with some rigor, some schedule, right?
no, you have to use feature flags. And you have to release features. Like, for example, if you're gonna, so this is what we do at my
Hmm.
organization right now. We have
I don't
gotten
think I've
rid of
heard
all of
that
the
in the
module version
context.
premium.
So trunk based infrastructure with
Yeah,
feature facts. I feel like I'm.
absolutely. I
I
did
mean,
a
I
presentation
do.
about that other conference.
This is something that ThoughtWorks preaches for software development, but for some reason, I never thought about this in the context of infrastructure.
Yeah, so it's the same thing. The first thing you have to do is you get rid of all the module versions, you point to the relative path, or you make sure that you're always checking out the latest version of the modules.
Right.
And then when you run your Terraform plan, of course you have to control how those features get rolled out, right? So the best way to control how features get rolled out across your infrastructure is by putting in feature flags, right?
Right.
So for example, we're doing a database migration. I'm changing my module to provision the new database as well as keep the old database instance running, and it's behind a feature flag. So when this gets applied into dev, it's going to spin up a new database. It's still going to have the old database there, and we're going to start pointing our customers to the new one, our client to the new one. If we're doing this with a cutover, we
How the
obviously
hell
need
do you do
to.
this with Terraform? But carry on.
It's very simple. On your module, you just put a variable that sets migration enabled true, and in production is disabled. And then you have another variable that says delete the old database, and then you you toggle the flags as you are getting confident. You have the same code running in dev. You have tested it. Then you're going into staging. You've tested the cutover, everything. Then you're ready to go to
Mm.
prod. You're doing the first flag on. The new database gets created. You reconfigure your clients. You turn on the second flag. The old database gets deleted. Your cutover is done. And then you go back to your module. You delete those variables, and across your real estate, everything is replanned with the latest version of that module, and it works because you've tested it everywhere, right? Your module is immediately planned everywhere, and it shouldn't show you any diff when you remove them. So it's feature flag development, with
I've never heard of this in all honesty. I've never
I do
seen
that with
this.
Atlantis only.
So
Atlantis Autoplan.
Does Atlantis have some sort of support for feature flags?
No, but I basically just do enable autoplan, and I have Atlantis project detection integrated within my repo bootstrapper. So when I set up my repository, it automatically generates the configuration for every single directory for Atlantis to figure out whenever this module changes, you need to replan all of the states that depend on that module. And so whenever anyone makes a change to a module, it's immediately tested everywhere. Like if it's going to have an impact on prod, the PR is immediately blocked because you haven't put in a feature flag on the variable. So you need to set up a variable to make sure that it's by default acting like originally, and then you go and update the call sites where you want this feature to be deployed, and then you said now enable it here, and then you test it in dev. It's okay. Then we can go and push this module. We can get the PR merged because then we do multiple PRs to roll it across our environments, and that way we don't have like some really old state using a really old module. We always have everything on head. That's the
Mm.
goal. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Wow. Wow,
And
that's
and so
really
the requirement is to have the capability to define what is the dependency or which modules a state depends on. If you don't do that, right, you're back to your original situation where everything is version pinned. And then now you could discover that one particular team is still using version 1.0. And if you're doing Semver, right, you're on version 2.0 means that you have a breaking change, right?
yeah, and
So
everyone
they have to
messes up
update their
Semvo,
calling
don't
code.
they? I mean,
Yeah.
or uses it as an excuse to break an API, which is
Yeah,
terrible.
but I'm doing that trunk-based development on my IC with feature flags, but I am still every single time doing semver on my modules because I'm snapshotting the module version. In case anything happens, I can always pin it. So this is something that happens sometimes is this module, this change is significant, and we can't just put it behind a feature flag because that's the flip side of feature flags, right? You cannot control the interaction of the flags if you have so many flags on them. So at some point, the risk is that maybe one team is adding a variable for their use case, another team is another variable, and how do those interact with each other? You don't know how they interact with each other. So it's nice to say like, oh, we know all of the possible configurations of the feature flags together. We know that it's going to work. We don't. If we don't clean up feature flags, and if we are not
Mm.
careful, we have other complexities to deal with.
Yeah, so
Um,
it's not there's no silver bullet, of
no
course. Yeah,
silver bullet,
I
of
think I know
course.
what you mean there. Like
Yeah.
clean, yeah, like then you have, new problem.
So every single module change comes with a Semver like change log and an actual snapshot of that module pushed into an S3 bucket. So if we need, for whatever reason, we can pin a module, but it's highly discouraged.
I
If
see,
you
yeah.
do,
I like that
if you
backup
do go
plan.
ahead and pin it, then I set up a scheduled action that detects any states that have a pinned module. And then it goes and tries to unpin it and creates a PR to unpin it. And then the idea is that we need to get those PRs merged as soon as possible to basically unpin the modules. Otherwise, these particular states will start to lag behind and become more of a headache and lead you down yak shaving paths down the line, right? Um,
Cool,
yeah.
man. Thanks for all that wisdom, man.
But that all works if you're in a monorepo, right? And
Yeah.
and 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 then the other alternative, actually, to just this week, Config Hub, it was announced like last week, but this week they did an IT Next article where they go into details about the problem of YAML manifests and Argo CD. They're basically highlighting how a lot of people are abusing Argo CD with Helm to, in memory on the Kubernetes cluster, expand all of the YAML manifests and then fire it off at the Kubernetes cluster, and then they have no idea what's happening. So they're introducing the concept of infrastructure as data. No, configuration as data. CAD. Yeah, it's CAD. And I really still don't know exactly how their platform, but their platform, yes. Oh, there's another one, Napio. But there's one from today. It's Brian Grant's startup. There's a one that was posted like maybe 12 hours ago from Config Hub, where they go into the problems and the solution of configuration as data. Um, and in the problems, they are highlighting like the renovate bot approach. So if you version pin your modules or version pin your Helm charts,
Mm,
then you set up something like renovate to automatically create pull requests to
nag
update
people,
your
yeah.
things. Yeah.
I mean, actually, at
Uh,
my workplace, they've written a beautiful, like, 100-line Python script. And what it does, it's called distribute.py, and you can have a config to say like you want these paths pushed to these repos, or even I think even it supports like hierarchy. So basically, like if they want to make sure that every team in dev has this new config set, they push it out, or a new file in their repos. They just push it out so
yeah.
that everyone has a new workflow that they can use, or their workflow in their repos. Actually, this thing is missing repositories,
Yeah.
but
All of
but
that mapped
the
across repos then.
but
Yeah.
like I guess the repositories would sit here, but like yeah, it pushes it out. And they do this, and they say like, I said like, wow, I've never seen this before. So you didn't want to get depend about like a pull base flow going. Like it says, no, pull base will not work in our organization. We need a push. We need to be fast, and it needs to be updated like immediately. And I was like,
That's
wow, I've never
weird.
seen that before.
When they say push, do they go and create pull requests in the other on the
Nope.
other ones?
It,
Direct commit?
direct commit. Yeah, they have like a bot, and it just like just overwrites whatever they have.
So this is my biggest issue with all of these like cookie cutter and bootstrappers. Most of them they do a one-time bootstrap and they never consider the day two or
Exactly.
the
I
maintenance
created an
over
issue
time.
about this in GitHub. Let me see if I can
Oh,
find it.
forget about GitHub template repos. I hate them. Every time I see somebody use them, I just immediately want to shut that down. It's like, don't.
Yeah, like here's my question here. Hi there. Should a repository generated from a template keep up to date with an evolving template?
Yeah.
It says GitHub templates are designed for one-time scaffolding. Yeah, so
I created a worm in my previous organization.
so what do you mean to update stuff?
Yeah, so whenever I created a PR on my template repo, it would automatically create commits in my other repositories to pull it in to pull in the diff from that PR, except that it would copy to itself and then trigger itself. And I had to like explicitly allow GitHub Action workflows to trigger themselves. And then I created like 70 plus emails per minute across the whole email system. And then after like half a day, my CTO sent me a message like, "What's happening?"
What
And
do you mean? You're sending emails to
no,
different
yeah,
people?
because GitHub Action Run started like failing and sending emails like
Oh, I
the
see, I
the,
see,
the
I
run
see, I see.
failed, and so I was literally spent 3 hours killing action runs. Uh, it was a lot of fun. So I had this idea as well, like originally with template repos, maybe like 5 years ago, to automate this push down to all of the
Yeah.
repos that
So
auto.
I mean, in all honesty, at this particular client, I think the push mechanism works quite well because, you know, the relationship they have with the teams, like,
Mm.
you know, like these are data teams. They don't know what they're doing. They need this thing up to date now.
And then the
Uh,
other thing is, the moment I started using Progen.io, which is popular within the AWS CDK ecosystem, Progen.io is kind of like Dependabot. When you bootstrap a repository with this tool, it sets up an update, scheduled update system. So you can define
right.
like once a week, daily, and you can
Yeah.
also set up auto merge and all that.
Yeah.
And so what it does is it runs it downloads the latest version of the template and it runs it and it basically like self mutates and keeps the repo up to date and then auto merges. So it's pool based, but it happens
Yeah.
automatically.
But like, but I'm not too sure how we got here. We were talking about configuration
About
data.
version pinning and
I'm
pushing
actually not sure
changes.
Dependabot is a very scalable solution. Well,
So one thing I don't like about Dependabot is that it creates so many PRs, and that's why I usually disabled it. But you
and
can
people
actually
ignore
set
them.
up grouping.
I
Yeah,
know
that's
there was one repository where I think I set up like
yeah. I
auto
also use auto
mergers actually.
merge.
How did I do that again?
Oh, you have
Well,
to create a GitHub token for an auto merge bot
well,
to.
I'm not too sure how I can find my own auto merge. What should I search for? PR.
I use Dependabot with release please and auto merge on my Golang CLI for Terraform. It's a public repo. You want to see it?
Okay, if you, well, I mean, I've done it before. I just can't remember where I done it.
Yeah.
Okay,
The
well,
the problem with Dependabot is originally my biggest issue was all of the different PRs, but you can set up grouping rules. You can say like for this package manager, you group all the PRs. Instead of creating like 5 PRs, you create one for Go dependencies, for example, and then you set up
but
the
the
auto
question
merge
remains like you can't
label.
expect all these different teams to basically merge the PRs, and that's where things really
Well,
fall
that's why
down.
I don't think that what you mentioned earlier about the push flow is automatically committing to master. I think what it's doing is it's creating a branch, it's creating a PR,
No, no.
it tags it with a label, and
I
then it
swear to
auto
God, Vincent, it's
merges.
pushing it straight to main. They
So
usually
I
only
would never
use
do
it for
that.
updating workflows. They only usually do it for
Yeah.
updating workflows.
I think it's either it's pull or push. It doesn't really matter much. But I have the same flow, which it just creates a PR that the PR is labeled as auto merge, and then you have an auto merge bot that will auto approve. Actually, sorry, the PR is labeled as auto approve, and then that bot will auto approve
Mm.
those PRs, and then it will enable the auto merge as soon as the checks pass. So I will never merge
That's
or
quite a
commit straight to
complex.
master.
That's quite a complex setup, but I guess it
I
sounds
mean,
quite good.
let me share my screen and I'll show you the
Oh, sure.
repository. It is a public repo. Uh, oh, not what
It
I
says
wanted.
is requesting you to allow multiple presenters to share. Okay, whatever.
Okay, I'm sharing. Which one am I sharing? This one,
Okay,
I
I
guess.
think we got to wind up in a couple of minutes just because I got so much work today. Oh my God. And
Yeah, so
we never talked about AI. Oh God.
so here I have this Golang binary.
Oh,
It's a fork
are you
from.
sharing? I can't see it.
Oh, sorry. You can see it now.
Yeah, I can see it now.
Maybe let me drag it out of all these tabs so it's a bit less confusing. So I forked this from the Chan Zuckerberg Foundation, the wife of some Facebook dude, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
And they have a
Oh, just quick side note. Do you know Swix? What's his real name? He's Singaporean guy.
no. I
Have you
mean
never met
maybe.
him? I forgot his real name. I just call him by his handle. He did an interview with Mark Zuckerberg like last week.
Oh, nice.
So you know, one connection away. Okay,
Yeah.
carry on.
So this is a non-profit that uses Terraform to bootstrap some of the services that they use, and they have a lot of tooling there, some of Golang like tooling, and this one is a very opinionated Terraform bootstrapper. The reason I like it is because after using TerraGrunt, having all of your different Terraform state configurations spread across the repo, it was very hard to keep track of like exactly how things were organized. And so this uses a central manifest, a central YAML file that basically defines the layout of the repository. The idea is that this gets used across product repos so that every team is basically bootstrapping Terraform the same way, and then you can update the templates, and then every team updates their fork version, and then it updates the repository across, right?
Wow.
I'm using it in a monorepo way, which is not really the intended design. So I added features to like distribute the config file. So I ended up with kind of like an in between. But yeah, I basically forked it and I've been adding a lot of features. But what we're talking about is how do the releases happen here, right? So in this case, I also have this Dependabot configuration to automatically update my Go dependencies. And it doesn't directly merge. I mean, it doesn't commit to master, right? It creates a different PR and it does a Terraform group, as you see, right? It groups all of the dependencies that are related to Terraform modules and groups them all into one place. So it picks up like we're getting the latest Go-Getter, and if there's another module that is related to the Terraform group, it will be part of this PR. And then what happens is it automatically adds the bot merge label, and that gets auto approved. But it's using my path, so it's showing me as the approver. So it's using my GitHub token to approve this. And as
Mm.
soon as all of the CI/CD passes on the pull request,
Hmm.
only then does it merge, right? It enables auto merge, and when everything like see it enables auto merge, and when all is good and all the tests pass, then it gets merged. So you get
Your
a very controlled way of
your
deploying
profile
things.
looks like the opposite of my profile in GitHub. That's weird. Like I'm looking one direction, looking the other direction.
This is Scarface, right?
Oh, that's not
Not
you.
me. Yeah. So that I like this. I like this a lot. And what happens is all of these dependency updates get merged onto master, and then Google Release Please keeps track of them and basically tells me the next release that's
Hmm.
going to happen is going to include all of these
But
bumps.
have you used this in anger? I mean, have you used this with several teams? I'm just wondering if this is going to
So
work.
we use this CLI across our Terraform repos, but they're large. So we have like two or three of them. And basically, Fog is dictating the layout of the Terraform repo and integrating with Atlantis and also now integrating with Terra constructs. So it's bootstrapping TypeScript projects, it's setting up the TS config, it's setting up ES linting rules, everything. So all of those templates are inside Fog. And I don't recommend it because we're using it and it's working for us, but some people might not really like some of the things it does, right? But yeah, it does the full repo remote and it controls some part of what the grid will do. It controls how these components link to each other. So it determines what is the remote state for that component. So if you have a landing zone component and you have a cluster component and the cluster needs to understand where is the network created by the landing zone, then it will read those outputs from each other. So that's through the
Wow.
remote state. Right. So it's a very opinionated way. Again, originally
Yeah,
from
I
Chan
think
Zuckerberg, but I added a lot of features on
that's
top of that.
interesting. That's really interesting. Nonetheless, I think in my current gig, the the different teams are not really owning the infrastructure, so I don't need them to do a lot of complexity. I just need them to do the data type stuff, and I think I can control that better not using this. But I don't know. This is really interesting. But okay, I got to wind up here because I gotta go straight into work mode.
Okay.
Great talking with you. Unfortunately, we didn't talk anything about AI. I don't know. Maybe another morning I can do
Yeah.
the same thing. Just let me know.
Shit. Actually, I found out. Remember yesterday we talked and I said that I was doing like a quick dashboard because I'm using Beats to track issues for the LLM,
Yeah, you showed me that was great. Yeah.
but there are actually like six or
10.
seven people doing the same thing.
That's the beauty of the AI, isn't it? It's so
Yeah,
beautiful.
so I found some kind of working dashboard and it's pretty neat. It gives you like a full overview of your large
Okay.
features and
So
your epics.
let's pick up on that
Hmm.
next. Don't no more talking about infrastructure. Full AI next talk, okay?
Yeah,
And I'm happy to wake up in the morning. Just let me know what day suits you.
yeah, sounds good.
I mean,
Have a nice
could even be tomorrow. I don't mind. See you.
sounds good. Yep, see you. Bye.